Hello and welcome to Landy's Crypto Corner. Today is February 20th, 2024, and we are staring at charts yet again, taking a look at Bitcoin on the daily. We can see that Bitcoin has closed another daily candle above the upper first standard deviation of the Bollinger Bands here, which is coming in at around 51,950 or so. Now, if Bitcoin can remain above the upper first on a closing basis, that does preserve the opportunity to run the highs of the range, which it did in yesterday's candle right around $53,000, actually put in a higher high, hitting our $53,000 target. If it can get above there in the intermediate timeframes below the daily, then I would be looking towards that upper second. And as long as Bitcoin is closing candles above the upper first, that preserves the opportunity for it to go and hit that upper second, which is now coming in just above $55,000 and just below 56, coming in at 55,750 or so. Now, if Bitcoin does head up that way, I would be looking somewhere around 55 to 60, so the mid $50,000 range. And that is born upon the criteria of closing above this now wick high right at $53,000, which is the area that I told you to watch out for in the prior staring at charts video. And if Bitcoin can close above there, then we're looking to mid 50s, possibly deeper 50s later on. And in this case, if it can stay closing above the upper first, it will preserve that opportunity and even above the current range lows, which are coming in at around 50,640 to 650. If that area is lost, though, I would start looking back to the basis band around the previous deviation high from this tighter range over here prior to putting in the deviation low before marching up in this manner, this very, very aggressive manner, I should say. And in this case, we can see that the basis band is right around a very important level that we'll look at again on the support and resistance chart. This is coming in at 48,150. It's in and around the bear market monthly swing high from 2022. If that area didn't hold up, we look down to closing support and resistance here, somewhere around the monthly at 47K. Kind of got a range bracketing this basis band between that $47,000 monthly and the wick high that's coming in around $49,000. That would be the primary area of interest, at least initially, to the downside. If Bitcoin did lose, I would say somewhere around 50,500 or so on a close. But until we see that, it's up and to the right. That's the name of the game. As long as we're seeing closes above that 50,500, 50,650 area. And in this case, if it did lose the basis and subsequently the area here at the monthly on the close open at 47,000, then we just look down to the next wick high coming in at 46 to this wick high over here, which is coming in at $45,000. And then we've got the closes also coming in there of the tighter range around that $45,000 wick high over here. So that is now right around the lower first standard deviation. And this is something that I've talked to you guys about a lot. You want to see the lower first standard deviation start getting above the prior moves, highs, and then above the current moves, most recent highs, and especially the last big low. And in this case, we had the big low side structure coming in here with the low into the weekly at 41,850. And then a bit of a higher low coming in the low $42,000 range. So the upper first is now above those lows and above the highs here, which are right around 43,900, 44K. And that's a very good thing. So if Bitcoin did start to, bearishly reclaim the deviation high and then the smaller range high, we still have that volatility support down there by the lower first, coming in now at 44,369. Nice. All right. This is playing out almost nearly to a T what I've been explaining lately, even to the dollar at $53,000 even. That is the exact number that we've been looking for. And when we go over and look at the support and resistance chart, the main reason that we've been looking for this number is that on closes above this monthly swing high from the bear market monthly swing high there at 48,230, where the basis band is now coming in. Well, we were looking generally to this weekly at 50,800, to the next weekly above it at 51.8. And if Bitcoin can close candles above there, then in general, we were looking somewhere around the September of 2021 weekly swing high. Now, this was the swing high prior to a pretty major rundown to around the upper $39,000 region, $40,000 region, before going on to make new all-time highs. Excuse my phone there. Now, we did see Bitcoin poke right at that 2021 swing high, which is coming in a little bit lower than $53,000. But I was saying look for $53,000 kind of as a general number. It is a whole number, so very likely to get hit, and it did. Now that weekly swing high is coming in at just under there at 52,944. So if we do see a daily close above there, in general, I would be looking towards the $53,000 wick high, or the current wick high of this smaller consolidation range at the highs. And then above there, somewhere around the mid $50,000 region by the upper second standard deviation. Now, of course, close after close with the basis band rising aggressively like this, we will see the upper second get even deeper into this area as long as Bitcoin is closing above the basis and especially above the upper first standard deviation. And I did call this out as well. I want you to pay attention to how this plays out. Now, we do see BBWP is in a contraction phase, or a cool down phase, as I like to put it. But we are still seeing expansion of the Bollinger Bands, in this case, up and to the right, with the upper standard deviation sloped up and the lower standard deviation sloped up. Now, this is very bullish. And this BBWP number is volatility within the context of the Bollinger Bands. We're still in an expansive phase of the Bollinger Bands. We have not yet seen contraction. When we do start to see contraction of the upper second and upper first, that's typically going to come when Bitcoin is getting below the upper first, either by trading and closing below it, or by it passing price. So Bitcoin goes sideways and then the upper first continues past price. Therefore pulling, that's because the basis band in this case is getting pulled up towards price action. That's where we would see a very quick cool down of BBWP more aggressively than what we are seeing right now. And then we would also see a bit of a contraction phase on the Bollinger Bands. In this case, it is still in expansion, and very good expansion at that. So until we see the upper first pass price and or price close down below the upper first, and specifically break the lows here of the current range lows at around that 50,500 to 50,650, then, I'm not looking for too much more to the downside. If we do see that, then we're looking for those horizontal support and resistances below. Now, just to call that out again, for those of you that might be new, the $47,000 support resistance area is a monthly, and we saw closes on the daily come in just below there with wicks coming through it. But below this monthly swing high and the daily basis band, we can see that it's a big zone of support at the monthly at 47,000 to 45.5 here, where we saw a deviation wick into it in the lower term timeframes at $46,000. We saw it get poked at 45.5 in the next candle before it dump off into the weekly down here in this tighter range. And then the front run of this monthly at 45.5 was the initial push up to $45,000 even. So Bitcoin is playing very technically, very beautifully. And, from the looks of it right now, up and to the right is the name of the game. Again, the specific criteria being that Bitcoin is continuing to close daily candles above around 50,500 to 50,650 or so. Now, when moving up the timeframes here to something like the 2-day, well, we do have that closing with today's daily candle, and we can see that Bitcoin does have the opportunity to go spike that upper second as long as it is above the upper first in this case, excuse me. The upper second is now coming in at 53,500. If it does get above, it will maintain this aggressive move on BBWP volatility expansion within the context of expanding Bollinger Bands. And the upper first is above this wick high at $49,000. So 49,100 here on Coinbase Spot. And as long as Bitcoin is closing 2-day candles above that upper first, well, the upper second is likely the upper bounds of the target, and maybe even through it, to somewhere around the upper third, as long as BBWP volatility is still expanding. In this case, this is coming in the deeper $50,000 region at almost $58,000. Now, there is some important areas to be aware of up there. So if Bitcoin does get above the September of 2021 weekly swing high here at around that $53,000 area on the daily at the wick high, well, we would initially be looking for this upper second area to get tagged somewhere in and around the mid $50,000 region. But above there, above this weekly support area at 50,800, 51.8, and especially above 53, then we would eventually be targeting this monthly up here at 58.8. And that is going to become a zone between 58.8 and 61,350 up here. So let's pull this up a little bit. And you can see that this is a big monthly zone. And this is right around the monthly closing all-time high area. So, above there, of course, we're looking at all-time highs. And does it have the ability to go do that? I do think that it does, especially as it is maintaining BBWP volatility expansion in the context of expansion of the Bollinger Bands. And when we go up another time frame, this one just closed and opened again with today's candle. And this did get a close above the upper second standard deviation in the previous 3-day candle. We have now opened underneath it, but we can see that this is at 52,800. So above there, we're looking at continued aggressive expansion of the Bollinger Bands here with continued BBWP price volatility expansion in the context of closing around that upper bound of the bands. And as long as it is trading and closing 3-day candles above the upper first at around 48,860, almost $49,000 by this wick high, then we're looking at Bitcoin to continue to play around the upper second standard deviation. And could it even go hit that upper third? Yeah, with volatility remaining this high, it certainly can. And this is coming in at 56,750. And this is going to be, a little bit deeper than that daily target. So intermediate term timeframes below the 3-day can play in and around the mid 50s, but as this continues to expand, it's going to make available those deeper targets unless it wants to go hit those upper thirds, which are extreme reads. And we can see that Stoke is still pointed up on the 3-day here. 46.6 is the pivot number there. Bitcoin trading pretty well above that at the moment. If we go back one to the 2-day, we can see that we do have Bitcoin in the overbought zone of the Stoke here. And of course, this is a regular Stoke, not a Stoke RSI. So this is measuring close over close price momentum, not velocity of RSI. So in this case, we can see Bitcoin hang out in this area for quite a long while. And in the overbought and oversold zones are typically where we see the biggest moves. And in this case, on the 2-day, closures above 52,300, basically where Bitcoin's trading right now, would keep the Stoke crossed to the upside. But even if it crosses down, with an expansive phase like this, as long as Bitcoin is playing in the strong half of the bands, it's very, very bullish. So above the upper first to the basis band here. So from the 2-day perspective, that would be above 49,250, 240 area and $45,000 at the basis on the 2-day there. From the 3-day perspective, the pivot number is quite a bit lower there at 46.6. So that would be the equivalent of dropping that monthly at 47,000 and then coming back down and tagging and closing within this candle structure here on the previous highs at around 46,125. That would turn Stoke down. Of course, that's right around the basis. Still bullish above the basis and especially above the upper first. We can see that from the 3-day perspective, we have the lower first above the previous low here. This was a deviation low. And in this case, it is coming in at around $41,000. So I would expect that to, begin aggressively moving to the upside with the basis if Bitcoin plays in the strong half of the bands here above the basis, while we see expansion of the lower second, lower third, and then, of course, the upper first, second, and third standard deviations. Very good read here. Very healthy BBWP expansion, very healthy band expansion. So, in my opinion, as it stands at this particular moment, it could change between now and the next 3-day close open, but looking very strong and looking like continuation. We move this over to the 4-day, which is going to be closing with the daily and 2-day, of course, at the end of today's daily. We can see that Bitcoin closed the previous 4-day above the upper second. This is coming in at $51,000 basically. And that does make available the upper third here, which is coming in right around that mid $50,000 region, coming in at the low side at 54,300 or so. And we can see that as long as it's trading and closing 4-day candles above the upper first, which is coming in at 47,675, 47,700 or so, which is above the close open over here at $47,000 at the monthly. We're looking up and to the right. This is a beautiful pinch on the Bollinger Bands to re-expansion. We see BBWP is supporting this move, so price volatility in the context of Bollinger Band expansion from compression to expansion looks beautiful. Looks like continuation as it stands right now. BBWP well up over the moving average. I would expect this to continue at the end of this daily closure when the 4-day closes with the 2-day. We see that the pivot is coming in at 44,285, so still looking very good and pointed skyward. And I'll call your attention to what we talked about in yesterday's video, or live stream, I should say, and that is the 5-day is re-expanding as well. And closures above the upper first are going to keep this expansion going. We see it's at a 49/25. We do see a slight pinch in the Bollinger Bands to re-expansion here. Bitcoin did close the previous 5-day above the upper second standard deviation, which has moved up above price. So this might govern the top side for at least a shorter period of time. We'll see how this plays out, especially in the timeframes below the 5-day. In particular, that 2-day, 3-day, 4-day closure structure. And we can see that the upper second is right around where Bitcoin is currently trading. Slightly above price action right now in the lower term timeframes, but it's coming in at 52,337. And the upper first is above the close open of the highs over here, which are at 46,666. And the upper first is almost at $48,000 now. So as long as it's trading above the upper first, the upper second and third during an expansion like this are the most likely targets. We can see the upper third is now at 56,725 or so. It is oscillating around up there. Now, if Bitcoin did lose that area, the basis is the primary target to the downside here. It's now coming in above, or no, it's right around the highs of the lows, or the daily consolidation prior to the move up to these new highs at $53,000. This is coming in at 43,500, 43,600 area. We can see the lower first is now above this swing low wick of this higher low structure in terms of a close. Now, this was a lower low wick or swing, if you like, but in terms of a close, this was a higher low close. There was no real, I guess you could call this a lower low close, because this was a higher low, this was a higher low close to a higher high up here, and then a lower high. This was a deviation, so this would be the deviation close. But the main read on this is that the lower first is above that wick low at 38,500, which was directly into that monthly support there. You may recall that we called this one to the dollar here, right there at 38,500. It was $1 off at 38,501 on the wick. So this is now coming in at 39,170, 180 region. So basically 39.2. During the next closure, we do want to see this get above this close open down here at around 39,950, 40K or so on the 5-day. And that just gives the bands a more bullish position. When looking at Stoke, we can see Stoke is pointed to the upside. Pivot is at 45,300. We can see BBWP is taken off and the moving average is chasing. It's now at a 49/25, excuse me. Looks beautiful. I think that this is destined for up and to the right as an anecdotal take. Is it going to happen, this week? I don't know. The 12-hour is in a cool down phase for BBWP. We see it's at a 0 moving average chasing, so we'll know. We'll see re-expansion in probably, today is when. I'm sorry, today's not Wednesday, is it? Is today Wednesday? What day is today? I don't even know. Let me look. Today's the 20th. Today is Tuesday, so we'll revisit this tomorrow during our live stream on Wednesday even. But essentially what I'm going to be looking for with the 12-hour is for this to, well, set a range, upper second standard deviation coming in at just under $54,000 and the lower second standard deviation coming in at 48,650 or so. And this, to me, is telling me that because the lower second is right around this high, that if we did see closures below the lower second that then take out this high or reclaim this high bearishly and then reclaim this low here at around 47.7 or so, then we're probably going to see continuation down to around that monthly at 47K by the current 12-hour lower third standard deviation. Now, if you look left, you'll see that that's right around these highs on a close for the 12-hour. Now, for the upper second standard deviation above there, it's, it would be above the current wick high at that swing from 2021 on the weekly at just around $53,000. If we did see that area taken out, of course, that would be above the upper first. We would start to see BBWP pick up. But what we really want to see for expansion on the 12-hour is a close above the upper second to really start targeting not just those mid $50,000 region areas, but eventually the monthly up there at 58.8 to the monthly just above at 61,350 or so. So I will be watching this very closely. It is in a compression phase right now, so the expansion phase is really going to tell the story for the daily and and higher term timeframes even. Man, I'm having a tough time today. My apologies. When looking at something like a 4-hour as it relates to the 12-hour, we can see that this is set up in a very tight range. This is going to give away the expansion phase for the 12-hour basically. Closures above the upper second, right around 52.485, so basically 52,500. And I would be looking for the wicks to get ran over here somewhere around the current wick highs in the upper $52,000 to $53,000 range. And then the condition is that we see a 4-hour closure above there because we would be getting expansion above the upper second, but it still needs to reclaim that resistance overhead and flip it to support and or move through it. So in this case, we need to see a close above around 52.5. That then goes on to take out $53,000 on a close. Then we're looking to the mid $50,000 region, check that off, and then possibly more on top of that to the deeper $50,000, low $60,000 region. Now to the other side of this, very, very easy now, below the lower second standard deviation on a close. Again, when we're talking about upper second and lower second, we're talking about closes to kick off expansion, not wicks. In this case, below the lower second on a close, we're looking somewhere around the close open down here at $51,000 to the wick lows, which, to be fair, there was a pretty deep wick in yesterday's price action down to 50,764, but we would need to see a closure below 50,650. So the local consolidation range lows on a daily. On a 4-hour close, we need to see it close below there. It would already be getting expansion, then taking out the support. And possibly bearishly reclaiming the wick over here at 50,400 to 500, maybe even the close opens. Then we start looking towards the left, $49,000 at the wick highs, 48,500 at these lows, and possibly down into that monthly primary support area, not just the 48,230 bear market swing high. Very, very easy setup. We do see that BBWP is elevated. Let's see if I can actually point at it. 14 over 14. So it is above the moving average, but let's see its position. Actually, yeah. So this next phase on the 4-hour is likely to tell the story, But again, remember, it's got to close above $53,000 on the close while getting that expansion to go start looking for deeper price action into the mid 50s and deeper 50s, and or breaking down below $51,000 on a close that then subsequently takes out 50,650 or so, 50,500 on a close. Then structure is broken on expansion to the downside and or upside. And then we can look for that to follow through with something like the 12-hour daily, 2-day, 3-day, 4-day, 5-day, and weekly. And I do want to remind you before I go that the weekly did turn back up on the last weekly close, or this most recent weekly close. It is right up against that upper second standard deviation, and we do see volatility expansion. So we see BBWP expansion, so price volatility expansion in the context of the Bollinger Bands and in the strong half of the bands in this case, being above the upper first. And we do have a confirmation with the moving average pointing up as well. I do want to see one more weekly closure like this to really call it, really call that expansion phase for price volatility. But the Bollinger Bands are already pretty expanded, so likely to get volatility in those lower term timeframes, even if there is a markup in price. But we can see that the pivot is at 47,500 for the weekly Stoke. So it is pressure up right now. And as long as Bitcoin's trading and closing candles above the upper first, it's very, very bullish. That upper first is coming in at 46,800. And as long as it's closing above the strong half of the bands here, and that is coming in at the basis band there at around 40,681. It's up and to the right, to be quite honest. Until then, until we saw something break down from the basis band and then subsequently the wick low there at the monthly at 38,500, I'm not really looking very much further downside for quite a while. Maybe volatility within the context of a widening range here, but I think those looking for below $30,000 or $30,000 even might be looking for a long time at this point if this continues like this. So, and even if it did dump off in some sort of hellacious way, not financial advice, I think it's more opportunity than not, though. That's going to do it for me today. I will be back tomorrow with a live stream. We'll do our regular Wednesday market madness stream, and we'll take a look at Bitcoin. We'll take a look at Dixie, gold, and traditional markets. And if there is time, I will also take some requests for altcoins as well. You have a wonderful morning, afternoon, and evening, no matter where you are in the world. Please trade safe. And of course, as always, stay safe. With all of that being said, Landy out.